September 28, 2025, Belgorod, a Russian city just 40 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, 3:17 a.m. A security guard at the thermal power plant hears a sound, a high-pitched whine. It's getting closer, faster, then 6 explosions in 12 seconds. The Belgorod thermal power plant, completely destroyed, total blackout, 400,000 people without electricity. Russian military bloggers write in dismay, HIMARS, again, 70-kilometer range, 6 rockets, 6 hits. Impossible to intercept. The power plant, total damage. But here's what no one understands. This HIMARS technology, the very technology that's now annihilating Russian infrastructure, is based on a German concept from 1936, invented by the Wehrmacht, copied by the Soviets, perfected by the Americans, and now it's destroying the Russian heirs of the Soviet system. The circle is complete. Let me show you how German rocket artillery from 1936 invented modern warfare and is now in Ukraine, destroying Russian forces. 1936, Kummersdorf, a German army testing ground south of Berlin. Artillery engineer Major Rudolf Nebel is testing a new weapon system. Not a cannon, not a mortar, a rocket launcher with 6 tubes, each capable of firing a 15-centimeter rocket, salvo fire. All 6 rockets in 10 seconds. The target, 6,000 meters away, is hit with 41 kilograms of explosives per rocket. That's 246 kilograms of explosives in just 10 seconds. Wehrmacht generals observe the test. They're impressed, but skeptical. They compare it to conventional artillery. A 15-centimeter howitzer can also fire a 15-centimeter shell. But the howitzer is more precise. The rocket is less accurate. A howitzer barrel lasts for 10,000 shots. The rocket tube is cheap, but the rockets are expensive. Why rockets instead of howitzers? Rudolf Nebel explains, weight. A 15-centimeter howitzer weighs 5.5 tons. It needs a heavy tractor to pull it. The rocket launcher weighs just 540 kilograms. 2 men can move it. A horse-drawn cart can transport it. Rate of fire. The howitzer fires 4 shells per minute. The rocket launcher fires 6 rockets in 10 seconds. Then it needs to reload. But in those 10 seconds, it delivers more firepower than the howitzer in a minute. But the most important advantage, the psychological effect. Nebel shows a film of the test. The rockets don't fly silently, they screech, because each rocket has 26 laterally inclined nozzles. The nozzles create rotation for stability, but the rotation creates noise, a high-pitched howl, like a siren, like a scream. 6 rockets simultaneously create a noise that terrorizes people. The Wehrmacht approves production. 1937, official name, 15-centimeter Nebelwerfer 41. Why Nebelwerfer? Camouflage. The Treaty of Versailles forbids Germany from having heavy artillery, but it does allow smoke launchers for defense. So the Wehrmacht calls it Nebelwerfer. Nebel meaning smoke or fog, fooling the League of Nations. They think it's a defensive smoke bomb. In reality, it's an offensive, high-explosive rocket. But here's the irony. Germany develops the Nebelwerfer secretly, but shares technical details with the Soviet Union. Why? The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union become allies, sharing military technology. The Germans show the Soviets tank designs, jet engine tests, and rocket artillery. 1939, a Soviet military delegation visits Kummersdorf. They see the Nebelwerfer tests. Soviet engineers take notes, photograph everything. They study the rocket design, understanding the principle: multiple tubes, salvo fire, cheap launchers, spin-stabilized rockets. Psychological shock effect. The Soviets return to Moscow, reporting to Stalin. Stalin orders, develop a Soviet equivalent. The NII-3 Institute gets the order. Rocket researchers Andrew Kostikov and Ivan Gvai lead the project. They've already worked on aviation rockets. Now, they're adapting the technology for ground artillery. 1939 to 1941, NII-3 develops two systems, the BM-8 with 82mm rockets and the BM-13 with 132mm rockets. Both use the same principle as the Nebelwerfer, multiple tubes, rapid salvo fire. But instead of 6 tubes, the BM-13 has 16 rails. It can fire 16 rockets in 7 to 10 seconds, mounted on a truck for mobility. But before the BM-13 is finished, the German-Soviet alliance explodes. June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa. Germany invades the Soviet Union. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact shatters. The technology exchange ends, but the damage is already done. The Soviets have studied German rocket technology. They know how it works. They're now building their own version. July 14, 1941, Orsha, Belarus. German Wehrmacht units occupy a railway junction. They're storing fuel, ammunition, vehicles. They feel safe. Soviet forces are 15 kilometers away, too far for artillery range. 3:15 p.m. German soldiers hear a strange noise, a roar, a thunder. The sky darkens, not from clouds, from smoke trails. 112 rockets hit the German depot in 10 seconds. The explosions create a firestorm. Fuel depots detonate. The ammunition depot explodes. The complete depot is annihilated. German losses over 2,000 dead. Soviet losses in the attack, 0. That was the world's first combat deployment of the Katyusha BM-13. Commanded by Captain Ivan Fyodorov, 7 BM-13 launchers, each with 16 rockets, 112 rockets in total. Range of 8.5 kilometers. The Germans had no warning. No way to shoot back. The Katyusha trucks fired their salvo and drove away before German artillery could locate their position. German soldiers who survived Orsha report shock, writing, quote, "The sky was burning, the earth was shaking, the noise was like 1,000 organs. The explosions came before we heard the launch. Nothing in training prepared us. No artillery barrage is comparable. The Soviet attack was like the apocalypse." The Wehrmacht command is horrified. They analyze the wreckage. They find rocket fragments. They recognize it immediately. This is based on our Nebelwerfer concept. The Soviets have copied and improved our technology. More rockets, greater range, mounted on trucks instead of towed carts, better mobility. But the Wehrmacht has no reason to complain, because German Nebelwerfers have already been in use since 1940, the French campaign of 1940. Nebelwerfer units bombarded Allied positions. The Benelux countries, Norway, now the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. The Nebelwerfer 41 terrorizes Soviet troops, just as the Katyusha terrorizes the Germans. The difference? The Katyusha is more mobile. The BM-13 on a ZIS-6 truck can travel 60 kilometers per hour. It fires its salvo, leaves its position in 3 minutes. The Germans call this tactic shoot and scoot. The Nebelwerfer 41 is pulled by horses or light vehicles. Slower. Harder to relocate after salvo fire. July to December 1941. The Soviets produce more Katyushas. The BM-13 becomes standard. New units are formed, Guards mortar units, elite troops, directly subordinate to Stalin. Each unit receives 8 to 12 BM-13 launchers. Training is intensive. Drivers learn rapid positioning, loading in record time, planning escape routes before firing. The German Wehrmacht adapts, developing counter-tactics. Aerial reconnaissance seeks out Katyusha launchers. If discovered, Stuka bombers are called in, or artillery concentrates fire on suspicious trucks. Sometimes it works, but Katyushas are fast, hard to find, even harder to destroy before they fire and disappear. Then, something interesting happens. Summer 1942. German troops capture a Soviet position near Tunisia, finding an abandoned Katyusha BM-8 launcher, rocket rails intact, some rockets still loaded. Wehrmacht engineers examine the system closely, measuring dimensions, analyzing rocket design, sending a report to Berlin. SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler reads the report. He's responsible for weapons development at Waffen-SS, sees the Katyusha design, recognizing this is simpler than our Nebelwerfer, rails instead of tubes, cheaper to produce, easier to maintain. Rockets are unguided like ours, but the system is more efficient. Kammler orders. Copy it! The Waffen-SS wants its own rocket launcher. The Wehrmacht has the Nebelwerfer. The SS wants an equivalent. But the Wehrmacht leadership is not thrilled. Production capacity is limited. Resources are scarce. It's 1942. Germany is fighting on three fronts: the Eastern Front, North Africa, the Atlantic. Factories are already producing tanks, aircraft, U-boats, artillery. No capacity for a new rocket system. But the Waffen-SS has its own production networks, concentration camp labor, forced labor. Kammler orders the development of an 8-centimeter rocket multiple launcher, a direct Katyusha copy, but with German adjustments, 48 rockets instead of 16, 3 rows with 16 rails each, mounted on a tank chassis for better protection. 1943, the first 8-centimeter rocket multiple launchers are produced, also called Panzerwerfer 42. Mounted on Opel Maltier half-track trucks or on damaged Panzer IV chassis, fires 48 rockets in 10 seconds. Range 7,000 meters. The noise is deafening. Allied soldiers call it moaning mini, like the Nebelwerfer, because of the screeching sound. But here's the irony. The German Nebelwerfer influenced the Soviet Katyusha. The Soviet Katyusha influenced the German Panzerwerfer. Both sides are copying each other. A rocket artillery arms race from 1941 to 1945. Germany produces approximately 5,500 Nebelwerfers and 300 Panzerwerfers. The Soviet Union produces over 10,000 Katyusha launchers of various models. Why did the Soviets produce more? Resources. Soviet factories moved behind the Ural Mountains from 1941 to 1942, outside German bomber range. They produced massively trucks, rockets, launchers. The American Lend-Lease program supplied raw materials, steel, aluminum, explosive chemicals. The Soviets could scale industrially. Germany, on the other hand, struggled with resource shortages starting in 1943. Allied bombers destroyed factories. Fuel refineries were bombed. Raw material supplies were interrupted. Priorities shifted. Tank production became more important than rocket launchers. Nebelwerfer production declined in 1944. War's end. May 1945. Germany capitulates. The Soviet Union and Western allies divide Germany, also dividing the spoils of war, technology, documents, weapon systems. The Soviets take everything from their occupation zone. Nebelwerfer factories in Thuringia, a tank factory in Saxony, engineers, technicians, forcing them to come to the Soviet Union, working on Soviet rocket programs. Americans and British do the same in the West. Operation Paperclip, securing German scientists, rocket scientists like Werner von Braun, but also artillery specialists, Nebelwerfer engineers, bringing them to the USA, to England, interrogating them, learning German rocket technology, but the Western allies aren't as interested in rocket artillery as the Soviets. Why? Doctrine. American and British military doctrine is based on precise artillery, targeted strikes, high accuracy. Rockets are inaccurate, scattering over a large area, not suitable for Western warfare. The Soviets think differently. Soviet military doctrine is based on mass fire, saturation bombardment. The goal is not precision, but saturation. Overwhelm the enemy with quantity. Rocket artillery fits perfectly, cheap, mass-producible, high rate of fire, psychological shock. Ideal for the Soviet deep battle strategy. 1950s to 1970s, the Soviet Union develops a new generation of rocket artillery. BM-14, BM-21 Grad, BM-27 Uragan, each version bigger, more rockets, greater range. The BM-21 Grad becomes standard in 1963. 40 rockets, 122 mm caliber, range 20 kilometers. Mounted on a Ural 375 truck, cheap, robust, easy to operate, perfect for mass production. The Warsaw Pact adopts the BM-21, Poland produces it as the RM-70, Czechoslovakia builds its own version, Romania, Bulgaria. Each Warsaw Pact country gets hundreds of BM-21s. By 1970, the Soviet Union and its allies have over 5,000 BM-21 launchers. NATO has almost nothing equivalent. And here's where the circle begins to close. 1960s. NATO generals analyze the Soviet threat. Recognizing the Warsaw Pact has a massive superiority in rocket artillery. In the event of war in Europe, Soviet BM-21 salvos would devastate NATO positions. Conventional artillery cannot keep up with the rate of fire. They need an answer. But NATO militaries hesitate. Rockets are inaccurate, wasting ammunition. American artillery philosophy is precision. One shell, one target. Why waste hundreds of rockets when 10 targeted shells suffice? The answer comes from intelligence analyses. The CIA and MI6 report. Soviet war plans for Europe are based on speed, blitzkrieg style, like the Germans in 1940. The first 48 hours are crucial. The Soviets plan massive rocket artillery bombardments, destroying NATO command posts, communication centers, airfields, logistics hubs. Then tank advances through the gaps. Without its own rocket artillery, NATO cannot counter. The BM-21 shoots from 20 kilometers away. NATO howitzers only have a 15-kilometer range. They cannot reach the BM-21. The Soviets fire, disappear. NATO cannot fire back. Asymmetric advantage for the Warsaw Pact. March 1974. The US Army writes a requirement for a new weapon system. Name, GSRS, General Support Rocket System. Specifications, must fire at least 12 rockets. Range, minimum 30 kilometers. More than the BM-21, mobile, armored, can operate under enemy fire, rapid reloading, can use conventional warheads or cluster munitions or mines. The USA invites allies, a joint development program. Great Britain, Germany, France, all participate, sharing development costs. September 1977. The contract goes to Boeing and Vought Aerospace, a joint design. Official name, M270 Multiple Launch Rocket System, abbreviation, MLRS. The design is revolutionary for Western standards. 12 rockets, 2 rows of 6 in pods, 227 mm caliber, range of 32 kilometers with the M26 rocket. Later, 70 kilometers with GMLRS guided rockets. The launcher is mounted on a modified M2 Bradley chassis, armored. The crew is protected. It can operate under artillery fire. But the most important difference compared to the Nebelwerfer or Katyusha, automation. The M270 has digital fire control. A computer calculates ballistics, wind direction, temperature, target coordinates. It automatically adjusts the rockets. Rate of fire, 12 rockets in 60 seconds. Then there's an automatic reloading system, new rocket pods in 5 minutes. or it can drive away and fire from another location. 1982, the first M270s are delivered to the US Army, the British Army, the German Bundeswehr, the Dutch Armed Forces, the Italian Army. By 1990, NATO countries have over 1,300 M270 launchers, not as many as the Warsaw Pact's BM-21, but technologically superior. Greater range, better fire control, higher protection. The Cold War ends in 1991. The Soviet Union collapses. The Warsaw Pact dissolves. The M270 was never tested in a major European war, but it does get a test in another war. The Gulf War in 1991. January 1991. Operation Desert Storm. The US Army brings M270s to Saudi Arabia. The goal, to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. Iraqi forces have Soviet equipment, including the BM-21 Grad. Will they outperform the M270? The answer is devastating. The M270 completely dominates. American and British MLRS units fire over 10,000 rockets in 6 weeks, destroying Iraqi artillery positions, command bunkers, tank concentrations. The rockets have cluster munitions. Each rocket contains 644 M77 bomblets, scattering over an area of 2 soccer fields, annihilating everything within that radius. Iraqi soldiers call the M270 Steel Rain. They later reported they couldn't see the M270. It was too far away. Only rocket trails in the sky. Then explosions. Hundreds of small detonations everywhere. No cover, no escape. Entire units wiped out in seconds. The US Army is thrilled. The M270 exceeds all expectations, destroying more targets than conventional artillery, with fewer of their own losses. Because the M270 fires from 32 to 40 kilometers away, outside the range of Iraqi counter-artillery, a shoot-and-scoot tactic. Fire, drive away, reposition. Iraqi troops can never locate the position. After the Gulf War, the US Army does a cost analysis. The result? The M270 is more cost-effective than previously thought. Yes, the rockets are expensive, but they destroy more targets per shot than howitzers. They require fewer rockets, less time, less risk for their own troops. Rocket artillery is not wasteful, it's efficiency. The 2000s, the US Army modernizes the M270. They also develop a lighter version, the M142 HIMARS, High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, half the size of the M270, 6 rockets instead of 12, mounted on an FMTV 5-ton truck. It can fit in a C-130 transport aircraft, fast worldwide deployment. Perfect for quick reaction forces. HIMARS also gets new rockets. GMLRS. Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System. GPS-guided. Precision within 10 meters. That's a revolution. Rocket artillery was always inaccurate, an area weapon. GMLRS makes it a precision weapon. One target, one rocket. Like the artillery philosophy, but with a 70-kilometer range. The 2010s, HIMARS is deployed in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Always the same results. High precision, long range, fast reaction time. The Taliban or ISIS can't hide. HIMARS strikes from 70 kilometers away, destroying command posts, weapons depots, artillery positions. The enemy can't shoot back, too far away. But the real test comes in 2022. Russia invades Ukraine, the largest conventional war in Europe since 1945. Russian forces use the BM-21 Grad, a modern version. Also the BM-27 Uragan, the BM-30 Smerch, heavy rocket artillery, bombarding Ukrainian cities, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, thousands of rockets daily. Ukraine asks NATO for help. The USA delivers HIMARS. June 2022. The first 4 launches arrive. Ukrainian troops train quickly. 2 weeks, then the deployments begin. And here, the circle is completed. Remember, In 1936, the Germans developed the Nebelwerfer, the first modern rocket artillery system. The Soviets studied it, copied the concept for the Katyusha. The Germans copied it back with the Panzerwerfer. After the war, the Soviets developed the BM-21. NATO responded with the M270. America perfected it with HIMARS. And now, from 2022 to 2025, HIMARS, the successor to the German Nebelwerfer concept, is destroying Russian forces, who are the successors to Soviet rocket artillery. July 2022. The first HIMARS strikes in Ukraine. The target, a Russian ammunition depot in the Donetsk region, 80 kilometers behind the front, unreachable for Ukrainian artillery. But HIMARS with the HIMARS rocket has a 300-kilometer range. 6 rockets fired, 4 hits. The depot explodes. Secondary explosions for 12 hours. Russian losses, an estimated 5,000 tons of ammunition destroyed. Russian military bloggers are shocked. They write, "How did they reach us? The depot was secure, 80 kilometers from the front. Nothing should be able to reach us. But the Ukrainians now have long-range missiles. Nowhere is safe. We must move all depots, at least 100 kilometers back." That is exactly what Ukraine wanted. HIMARS forces Russia to lengthen its logistics, depots further back, longer supply lines, more truck trips, more time, more vulnerability. The Russian offensive slows down because ammunition resupply is interrupted. August 2022 to December 2024. Ukraine receives more HIMARS. The USA delivers a total of 36 launches, a small number, but the effect is disproportionate. HIMARS destroys over 400 Russian ammunition depots, dozens of command posts, bridges, radar stations, S-300 and S-400 air defense systems, electronic warfare centers. Russia tries to intercept HIMARS with the S-400, with the Panzer S-1, with electronic jamming. The success rate is minimal. GMLRS rockets fly too fast, too small, difficult to track. GPS guidance is difficult to jam. Of an estimated 10,000 HIMARS rockets fired, the Russians intercepted perhaps 200. That's 2%, a 98% hit rate. And then, September 2025. Where this story began, the Belgorod thermal power plant, a HIMARS attack, 6 rockets, 6 hits, complete power outage for 400,000 people. The Russian government can do nothing. The power plant was 40 kilometers from the border. It was considered safe, but HIMARS, with a 70-kilometer range, easily reaches it. What makes this attack special? Not just the tactical effect, but the symbolic one. The Belgorod thermal power plant supplied Russian military bases, repair factories, logistics centers. Without electricity, repair plants cannot function. Damaged Russian tanks pile up, waiting for repairs. But without electricity, there are no welding machines, no tool machines. The repair backlog grows. And here comes the full irony. HIMARS is based on the German Nebelwerfer concept from 1936. A multiple rocket launcher, salvo fire, a mobile platform, shoot and scoot, psychological effect. All invented by Wehrmacht engineers 89 years before. The Soviets copied it in 1941, perfected it during the Cold War. NATO responded, the USA modernized it, and now it's destroying Russian successors to the Soviet system. Let me show you just how complete this circle is. Let's compare specifications. Nebelwerfer, 15 centimeters, 1936, 6 tubes, 6 rockets, a 41-kilogram warhead, range of 6,900 meters, reload time of 90 seconds, weight of 540 kilograms. Transport by horse or light tractor, the crew of 4 men. HIMARS M142 2025, 6 rockets, 90-kilogram GMLRS warhead, range of 70,000 meters or 300,000 meters with HIMARS. GPS precision under 10 meters, reload time of 5 minutes, armored cabin, Crew of 3 men, speed of 94 kilometers per hour on the road, a jump from a 6-kilometer range to 70 kilometers. That's an 11-fold increase. Or to 300 kilometers with ATACMS, a 50-fold increase. From unguided rockets to GPS-guided precision weapons, from horse transport to a 94-kilometer-per-hour truck, from a 90-second reload to automated pods in 5 minutes. But the fundamental principle is identical. Multiple tubes or rails, salvo fire, all rockets in seconds. A large area saturated with explosives, a mobile platform, fire and movement. The enemy cannot locate the position before the launcher is gone. Psychological shock effect. The Nebelwerfer was called Screaming Mimi. HIMARS isn't given a nickname, but the effect is the same. Russian soldiers fear the sound of incoming rockets. Technology evolved, but the concept remained. Rudolf Nebel in 1936 invented the core principle of modern rocket artillery. All subsequent systems built on it. Katyusha took the concept and made it more mobile. BM-21 scaled production. M270 added automation. HIMARS added precision. But every step is based on Nebel's original design. Production numbers show the effect. Lockheed Martin produces HIMARS. In 2021, before the Ukraine war, 60 launches per year. In 2024, 96 launches per year, a 60% increase. MLRS rocket production. In 2022, there were 840 rockets per month. In September 2024, 1,167 rockets per month. That's 14,000 rockets per year. A 40% increase over 2022. Why the increase? Global demand. Ukraine uses HIMARS effectively. Other countries want it. Poland ordered 500 HIMARS launchers, will be the largest HIMARS user outside the USA. Romania wants HIMARS, Lithuania, Estonia, Taiwan wants HIMARS, Japan wants HIMARS, Australia bought 20 launchers. Everyone sees Ukraine's success. Everyone wants the same capability. The global M270 and HIMARS fleet in 2025. The USA has about 540 HIMARS and 1,000 M270s. The United Kingdom, 42 M270s modernized to M270A1. Germany, 50 M270 Mars 2s. France, 44 M270s. Italy, 21 M270s. Poland, 500 HIMARS on order. Romania, 54 HIMARS on order. In total, over 2,000 launches worldwide, all NATO or NATO-allied countries. Russia, on the other hand, has BM-21 Grads, an estimated 2,500 active launchers. Sounds like a lot. But the BM-21 is from 1963, over 60 years old, inaccurate rockets, a 20-kilometer range, no GPS, no modern fire control. Russia tried to modernize with the Tornado S, but production is minimal. Maybe 100 Tornado SS produced, not enough to replace the BM-21. More modern Russian systems, BM-27 Uragan, BM-30 Smerch, TOS-1 Buratino thermobaric rockets, but all suffer the same problem. Limited range. The BM-30 Smerch has 70 to 90 kilometers, comparable to HIMARS GMLRS, but no precision. They scatter over a large area, wasting ammunition. HIMARS with GPS hits the target with one rocket. The Smerch needs 10 to 12 rockets for the same target. Ammunition consumption is critical. Russia fired an estimated 10 million artillery shells and rockets from 2022 to 2024, an enormous amount. Production capacity has reached its maximum, 3 million shells per year with North Korean help. But the quality is suffering. The failure rate is increasing. Ukrainian soldiers report that 20 to 30% of Russian rockets don't detonate. NATO produces fewer shells, but higher quality, higher precision. One GMLRS rocket costs $168,000. Expensive. But it destroys the target with a high probability. A Russian Grad rocket costs $5,000. Cheap, but it needs 20 rockets for the same target. That's $100,000. plus logistics costs, truck transport, storage, personnel. The total costs are comparable, but HIMARS is more effective. Specific HIMARS successes in Ukraine are documented. In June 2024, HIMARS destroyed an S-300 air defense system in the Belgorod region. The S-300 costs $115 million per system. Destroyed with 6 GMLRS rockets, cost $1 million, an exchange ratio of 115:1. In August 2024, HIMARS destroyed a Russian convoy in the Kursk Oblast. Hundreds of Russian soldiers killed, dozens of vehicles destroyed. The Russian offensive in Kursk stopped. Without HIMARS, Ukraine could have defended itself with much more difficulty. In September 2024, HIMARS hit a bridge over the Saim River in the Kursk region. Not completely destroyed, but damaged enough to interrupt Russian supplies. Russian units on the wrong side of the river isolated. They had to retreat. They lost territory. Every success demonstrates the principle that Rudolf Nebel established in 1936. Rocket artillery is not for precision. It's for range and flexibility and shock. HIMARS perfects these principles. It can hit from 70 kilometers. The enemy cannot shoot back. It can quickly change position. The enemy cannot target it. It can destroy high-value targets, command posts, air defenses, ammunition depots, interrupting enemy operations. The Russian reaction shows frustration. Russian military bloggers in 2024 write, "HIMARS is our greatest threat. We cannot intercept it. We cannot find the launcher. We cannot shoot back. The Ukrainians fire from 70 kilometers. Our artillery only reaches 25 kilometers. The asymmetry is unbearable. Russia tried countermeasures. More electronic jamming, GPS jamming. Sometimes it works, but GMLRS has an inertial navigation system as a backup. If GPS is jammed, the rocket still flies on. Precision drops from 5 meters to 15 to 20 meters. But that's still enough for large targets like depots or buildings, air defense systems, S-400, Panzer, Tor M2. All try to intercept HIMARS rockets. The success rate is low. GMLRS flies at Mach 2.5, very fast. Low radar signature, hard to track. Of 10,000 GMLRS rockets fired, the Russians may be intercepted 200 to 300. That's 2 to 3%. A 97% hit rate is exceptional. Let's compare this to historical rocket artillery, the Nebelwerfer from 1941 to 1945. There aren't exact hit statistics, but it's estimated that only 30 to 40% of the rockets actually hit their intended target area. The rest were scattered too far afield. The Katyusha BM-13 was similar, only about 30 to 40% effective. The BM-21 Grad, maybe 50% with modern improvements. HIMARS GMLs, 97%, a threefold improvement over these inaccurate rockets. But costs also increased significantly. A Nebelwerfer rocket in 1941 cost about 50 Reichsmarks. That's perhaps $500 today, adjusted for inflation. A Katyusha rocket cost 1,000 rubles, $2,000, inflation adjusted. A BM-21 rocket today, $5,000. A GMLRS rocket, $168,000. A 33-fold increase over the BM-21, but it destroys targets 30 times more efficiently, so the return on investment is actually better, despite the higher costs. The strategic impact of HIMARS in Ukraine cannot be overstated. In 2022, when Russia was on the offensive, Russian forces could operate closer to the front. Command posts were just 15 kilometers behind the lines. Ammunition depots, 20 kilometers, safe from Ukrainian artillery. Then came June 2022. HIMARS arrived. Suddenly nothing within 70 kilometers was safe. Russia had to relocate everything. Command posts moved a minimum of 80 kilometers back, depots 100 kilometers back. This doubled or tripled the length of their supply lines, more truck trips, more time, more vulnerability to drone attacks. The Russian offensive slowed measurably. In July 2022, before the full impact of HIMARS, the Russians were capturing 1,000 square kilometers per month. By September 2022, after the HIMARS disruption, it was down to 100 square kilometers per month, a 90% reduction, not just because of HIMARS, but HIMARS was a major factor, disrupting logistics, destroying ammunition supplies, eliminating commanders. Then came the Ukrainian counter-offensive in September 2022 in the Kharkiv region. HIMARS devastated Russian command structures. It isolated Russian units. It severed supply lines. Ukraine recaptured 3,000 square kilometers in just 2 weeks, the largest territorial gain of the war. HIMARS played a critical role. And now it's 2025. The war is 3 years old, and HIMARS is still critical. With new rocket types, like the PRSM or Precision Strike Missile, with a range of 499 kilometers, longer than ATACMS. First deliveries in 2025, Ukraine can now strike even deeper targets inside Russia. Airfields, repair centers, logistics hubs. The Belgorod thermal power plant was just the beginning. Russia cannot adequately respond. It doesn't produce enough modern rockets. The Iskander system is comparable to ATACMS, but production is limited. Maybe 50 to 100 Iskander missiles per year. The USA and its allies produce thousands of GMLRs and hundreds of ATACMS per year. This production asymmetry favors Ukraine. And that brings us back to the beginning, to 1936. Rudolf Nebel and Wehrmacht engineers invented the concept, the multiple rocket launcher, a mobile platform, salvo fire, massive firepower in a short time, psychological shock, the fundamental principles of modern rocket artillery. The Soviets learned from the Germans. They copied and improved it. The Katyusha terrorized the Wehrmacht from 1941 to 1945. The M270 dominated the Cold War. The German Nebelwerfer concept lived on in Soviet design. NATO learned from the Soviets and developed the M270 to counter the threat. The M270 was seen as a Nebelwerfer evolved. Now the Soviet system was being surpassed. The Americans perfected it with HIMARS. Precision plus range plus mobility, the best of all generations combined. And in 2025, HIMARS is devastating Russian forces. Russia is the heir to the Soviet system. The Soviets inherited German technology. The circle closes. The German innovation of 1936 returns and annihilates the successors of those who copied it. This is not just military history, it's a demonstration of how technology evolves. One nation invents, another copies, a third improves, a fourth perfects. And the original inventor nation is long gone from the equation. Germany developed the Nebelwerfer, but Germany now uses the M270 MLRS II, a licensed production of the American M270. The German Bundeswehr fires rockets based on an American design. That's based on a Soviet design. That's based on a German design. 4 layers of copying and improving. So, when you see the news today about Ukraine bombarding Russian positions with HIMARS, remember this technology began in 1936 at the Wehrmacht Kummersdorf with Rudolf Nebel and those 6 tubes of the Screaming Mimi. 89 years of development, from horse-drawn transport to a 94 km/h ZIS-6 truck, from a 6-kilometer range to 300 kilometers. From unguided rockets to GPS precision under 10 meters, from 540 kilograms of weight to an 11-ton armored launcher. But the fundamental concept has survived every step of the way. Every HIMARS salvo in Ukraine is a confirmation of Nebel's design principles. Rocket artillery works. Multiple tubes deliver more firepower than single guns. Mobility is more important than armor. Range trumps precision for strategic targets. The shock effect demoralizes the enemy more than the death rate alone. Russia knows this because the Soviets perfected rocket artillery during the Cold War. But now the technology is turned against them. HIMARS is better than the M270. More precise, longer range, better mobility. Russia cannot keep up. Production capacity is limited. Technology is outdated. Doctrine remains from the 1960s. Mass fire instead of precision doesn't work against NATO quality. In 2025, Lockheed Martin more than doubled HIMARS output, 96 launches per year, 14,000 GMLRS rockets per year. Poland has ordered 500 launches, the largest HIMARS order outside the USA. Poland alone will have more HIMARS than Russia has modern Tornado-S. The asymmetry grows every month. The long-term implications are clear. Rocket artillery is dominating modern warfare again, just as it dominated in 1941, just as it dominated in the 1991 Gulf War. Precision rockets combined with mobile launchers create an unreachable threat. The enemy can't strike back, can't intercept, can only suffer constant bombardment. Future conflicts will utilize HIMARS-like systems. China is developing the PCL-191, a similar concept to HIMARS, 8 rockets, 350-kilometer range, GPS guidance, mobile truck platform. China studied HIMARS and is copying the principles, just like the Soviets copied the Nebelwerfer. The circle repeats itself. India is developing the Pinaka MBRL, 75-kilometer range, 12 rockets, mobile on a truck. India is also copying. South Korea developed the K-239 Chunmoo, 290-kilometer range, 18 rockets. Korea is technologically advanced and probably surpasses HIMARS in some aspects. The technology is spreading. All these systems go back to Rudolf Nebel's Nebelwerfer. He created the template, multiple tubes, salvo fire, mobile platform. Every following generation improved the details, but the template remained the same. 89 years after its invention, that template still dominates rocket artillery design worldwide. If this story fascinates you, makes you think, or shows how technological development works across generations, then support this channel with super thanks. Researching such historical connections takes weeks, verifying technical details, checking production numbers. Tracing technology transfers through the decades. Your support enables more research, more hidden connections, more forgotten origins of modern weapons. Write in the comments, what other modern weapon has a forgotten World War II origin? Guided missiles, infrared targeting systems, drones, they all have historical roots. Let me know which story you want to hear next. And the next time you see HIMARS news, Ukraine hits a Russian target. Think of 1936, Kummersdorf. Rudolf Nebel, Wehrmacht engineers, screaming Mimi, a concept that revolutionized war. The Soviets copied it, NATO perfected it, and now, 89 years later, it destroys the Russian heirs of those who copied it. The circle is complete. A German invention returned home to destroy, not Germany itself, but the successors of those who stole it. History is cyclical. Technology is eternal. Innovation survives empires.